Hi, my name is Kishore and this is Moving Images. So Drishyam 2 turned out to be a really good movie, with sequels always being a hit or miss, with more of them being misses than hits these days. It is truly surprising that a movie that doesn't even require a sequel get to have one that actually does what a good sequel should do. Build on the previous movie, but take it in an entirely new direction. But today we are not going to discuss the cliched how to make a great sequel. Remember how George Kutty did this in the first film? Let's do a fun experiment of trying to figure out the various movies George Kutty would have drawn inspiration from for his every move in Drishyam 2. We'll be mapping out his character arc based on the movie choices that could have possibly shaped his decisions. Let's start with the easy one, the two undercover cops and George's house getting burgled. Although it is not made clear whether George is aware of the police's plan of spying on him using cops who go undercover as his neighbors, he is still shown to hold his tongue regarding the topic of the murder from the first film, even around his own family. This might suggest that he is aware that at some level he is being watched by the police, waiting for him to slip. So what might have inspired George to think this way? Well, undercover cops aren't new to Indian cinema. We have a plethora of choices, starting from Ragasya Police 115 to even Pokery. But for fun, let's watch which films might have inspired George in particular. George has his entire plan published as a novel by a writer hired by him and uses that against the cops in a brilliant twist. I thoroughly enjoyed this twist, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized how this single twist actually brings George's character arc to a full circle. George is shown as a film buff who bases his decisions and instincts from what he learned from fictional work like cinema. In Drishyam 2, he turns the tables by making it seem the police are basing their instinct to dig up the station floor and plant a body there after reading about it from a fictional piece of work. This is George turning his strength to the enemy's weakness. As for what films might have inspired George to do this, well, we have a couple of choices. There is of course the most obvious, Basic Instinct. The film follows the murder of a retired rock star and his wife who has written a novel that mirrors the crime. There is also some homegrown options like New Delhi, where a journalist commits murder and reports them first in his newspaper. Although the idea to novelize his plan may have been inspired by other movies, it is George Kutty's own intelligence and at a meta level, the brilliance of the film's writing to use it in such a way that it ties with his character arc. Something only George Kutty would do. Ah yes, the one place the makers of the film actually managed to write themselves into a corner and had to use luck as their excuse to get out of it. I am talking about the convoluted plot George employs to switch the body remains to fool the DNA test. This plan had so many things that could go wrong, and it made an otherwise plausible movie seem a bit far-fetched. Well, I will give my thoughts on how I would have liked to see this resolved at the end of this video. But for now, let's focus on what films might have inspired George Kutty to come up with this plan. Well, there is a Malayalam movie called Postmortem which shows bodies being switched inside a coffin. But again, let's do something fun. So our story starts right after the events of the first film. George approaches a young film buff and narrates his story so far. The film buff, who watches a lot of international movies, calls George Kutty's story a ripoff of a Korean movie called Project X. George is intrigued and does some research and realizes that it is actually a Japanese movie called Suspect X, and also realizes he should never discuss his story with the film buff. Anyways, he watches the film and gets a brilliant idea of switching the dead bodies. Only problem is that he has buried the body under a police station and he has to wait it out. Now, for my vision of how the whole luck explanation could have been tackled differently to make the movie work for me. At the beginning of the movie, we see the writer asking George Kutty to narrate his story.
ഒരു റൈറ്റർ പ്രൊഡ്യൂസറോട് ആശയങ്ങൾ ചോദിക്കുന്നതിൽ വിരോധാഭാസം ഉണ്ടെന്ന് അറിയാം. പക്ഷേ തൻ്റെ ആശയങ്ങൾക്ക് ഭയങ്കര ലൈഫുണ്ടോ.
We then follow the movie and show the climax as it is. Except for the part where the writer goes to the police and explains George's plan as it unfolds, we cut back to George, still with the writer ending his narration for his idea. The entire movie, after the scene between the writer and George, was just him narrating the story. We then see George hearing the news about the police station being dug up, as he predicted, and end the movie there, implying that now George will execute his plan. Whether he succeeds in it or not is left to our imagination. Until next time, this is Kishore signing off saying,
സിനിമയെ പറ്റി നമ്മളോട്